Week, U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador Jamieson Greer is visiting India for high-level talks with Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal and senior officials as both sides push towards finalizing a broader bilateral trade agreement. India and the United States are moving closer to finalizing a long-pending bilateral trade agreement, with negotiations now entering what officials are describing as the final stage or the final lap. According to reports, most major issues between the two sides have already been resolved, with only limited technical and tariff-related matters still remaining. Well, the deal is part of a broader strategic economic framework aimed at expanding trade, improving market access, and strengthening supply chain cooperation between the two countries. The proposed agreement is built on a pre-agreed framework that was initially worked out earlier this year, following multiple rounds of high-level discussions. Since then, both sides have been working towards aligning details related to tariff structures, trade rules, and implementation timelines. One of the key sticking points remains tariff balancing and competitive access to markets. India is pushing for a deal that offers it a competitive edge over other exporting nations, while the United States is seeking greater access for its agricultural and industrial goods, along with stronger digital trade and regulatory alignment. India has also been emphasizing the need to protect sensitive domestic sectors such as agriculture, while seeking better terms for key exports including textiles, pharmaceuticals, and engineering goods. The negotiations are being conducted under time pressure, with global trade deadlines and economic considerations adding urgency to the talks. Officials from both sides have described the process as close to completion, but yet not final. The agreement is being viewed as a major step in India-US economic relations, with potential to shape trade flows, investment patterns, and supply chain linkages in the coming years. For now, the deal remains unfinished, with final consensus still required on a few crucial trade and tariff issues before a formal signing. We'll talk about this and get some opinions from our guests. Joining us on the program is Mr. Peter Cardillo, Chief Market Economist. He's joining us live from Rome at this point in time. Mithali Nikore, economist, is with us on the program as well. Dr. Sharath Kohli, senior economist, joins us on the program as well. And last but by no means the least, Ambassador Sushil Singhal, former diplomat, is with us on the program as well. All right, Mr. Cardillo, I'll begin with you, sir. Appreciate you taking out the time and speaking with us. Well, like I said in my opening monologue, that the deal is final but yet not complete. And I also spoke about a few niggles that have prevented this deal from being signed. And the biggest niggle, perhaps the biggest elephant in that room, is the tariff or the tariff factor which has been imposed by President Donald Trump. How do you see the two countries navigating through these troubled waters which have also been imposed on other countries for offending the Americans at various levels? How do you see these two powers coming together through this FTA?
Well, I think eventually they will come together. And, you know, as all negotiations take place, some are concluded earlier than expected, and others take more time. The particular situation between the United States and India is somewhat more complex. Also because, you know, President Trump has from time to time steered away from the original tariffs imposed, and of course used as a bargaining power to raise even higher levels of tariff. And so that sort of throws a monkey wrench into the negotiations. But I'm very hopeful and that we should be getting the trade deal with India resolved. Remember that negotiations are just what they are, negotiations. So you have to give and you have to take. I think the United States aimed at higher tariffs, hoping to reach where they really want the tariffs to be. And I think that those tariffs are likely to be in line perhaps what India wants. So I just think it's a matter of time, but it will happen.
All right, it's only a matter of time and it will happen. Dr. Sharath Kohli, Are there any reservations in your mind about this trade agreement? Obviously, when it comes to agriculture, India has been protective of its farmers. It's been protective of this industry as well, which the Americans definitely want to penetrate. How are we going to, in fact, navigate this curveball?
Good evening, Vineet, to you, my fellow panelists, and the viewers. Well, I think there's a lot of slip between the cup and the lip. This is umpteen number of times that we've heard this. We are very close to the deal. We are almost about to sign the deal. We even took out a date from some pundit that, okay, this is going to be signed on that date and this date. And I think I've lost the count, actually, if you ask me, over the last year and a quarter as to how many times. So, the taste of the pudding is in eating it. Let's see how it happens. But as far as agri is concerned, there's a big red line. There's a big no. There's no question of India compromising. The position was same as before. It's the same as of now, and it'll remain the same in the times to come also. There's no question of allowing things like corn and soya into India, which are genetically modified. There's no question of bringing in dairy here, which doesn't fit our social and cultural fabric. It doesn't fit at all. And we are not a dairy deficient country anyway. We are world's largest dairy producers. We don't need those dairy products here. The big sticking point also, Vineet, I feel, is the 12% tariff, which they want to levy under Section 301B of the US Trade Act 1974 for the so-called forced labor. Because there's some of the products coming from China where supposedly there is some forced labor, and we are probably using those as raw material or as ancillary goods in the products being exported to America. So that's another sticking point. I really don't think these kind of penal tariffs, because they emanate out of the fact that we are into unfair trade practices. Remember, now if President Trump wants to impose additional tariffs, he will have to take the route of 301B, and he'll have to prove that there were unfair trade practices. And he'll also have to prove that there was a sufficient investigation done before. So I'm sure that is also one of the sticking points. Now, obviously, we will only know once it is signed, but I hope this issue is resolved, because now the other doubt which I have, which obviously when the details will come out, whether this 12% is going to be instead of 10%, is it going to be over and above 10%? So which will make it 22, or is this going to substitute 10%? That if it is 12 instead of 10, I would say it's fairly okay. Between 10 and 12, it doesn't make a lot of difference. And we also need to see, Vineet, that after this FTA or the trade agreement, how does India start competing with like goods coming from Vietnam, from China, from Indonesia, and from other jurisdictions? Where does it place our goods in the American markets? And of course, America wants its Harley Davidson or whatever to come to India. That's all, that is fine. But then how competitive India goods are, because the disruption in trade started happening from 2nd of April after the reciprocal tariffs came out. And America suffered as well. There was a lot of inflation which came in because of the reciprocal tariffs. So all said and done, I think I would rather wait for the signature on the dotted line. And even after signing, I really do not trust Trump administration. I still feel, anything can happen with President Trump being there. He signed the deal in France, Versailles, the other day. And look what happened. He's still giving threats that I'm going to bomb you because of Lebanon, whatever be the reasons. So with him, I have my doubts if this is signed. I don't want to sound pessimistic, but we'll have to see as it goes. I don't want to sound too much negative also, apart from being pessimistic. Let's see how it goes. No high hopes. Let the trade start. Let the ship start moving, and let the engine start, as they say, as President Trump says.
All right, fair enough. Ambassador Singhal, what do you make of this trade deal? Dr. Kohli rightly enunciated that we have gotten close to that finalization point many times in the past. How can we be certain that it's going to fructify this time around, keeping in mind that the Americans have, a lot on their hands, including that MOU with Iran? Sir, you're muted, sir. I can't hear you.
So audio is disabled. I think, sir, you will have to enable your audio. I can see your...
yeah, I can hear you now. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. The thing is that We would know, of course, when the discussion takes place, how things transpire. Of course, this is a discussion for quite some time. And we have to remember that, this is not a final FTA. This is only a part, interim agreement, which we are talking about. If that is the start for various reasons. Particularly, as Mr. Kohli pointed out, that's a tariff. I think tariff issue is the core issue in my view also, that India wants a better terms than other ASEAN or Vietnam and other countries. At the same time, we want to protect against future tariffs, because there is always a fear that you sign an agreement or deal, and then there can be further imposition, like we are talking about 300 and others. So there is always a fear that there will be additional. So that protection need to be taken, and I think that is one of the reasons why this discussion is taking longer than expected. Of course, dairy and all is already been talked about. Then NTBs is another issue from American point of view, and digital trade, yes, and as I said, uncertainty. So there's a lot of discussion, but we also have this way, as our Commerce Minister pointed out, that we have this deadline of 28th of July. This is a window which is open, and he also pointed out that we want to conclude this, whatever discussion we want to do by before 28th July. So that is, I would say that that shows that urgency on the both sides. And there will be, of course, this US TR is in Delhi, and he will be having discussion for next 2-3 days and see how we can move forward on the areas of concern for us and areas of concern for US before this window closes. I think that is the main point here in the discussion, as the Commerce Minister himself has admitted, and we have to see how things proceed. And I think this when President Trump met Prime Minister Modi during G7 at Avion, they have discussed this in detail. And as far as my understanding goes, some guidance has been given to the negotiators how to move forward in the areas which we find difficult. So there is a political directive now after the meeting, and I think we'll see the result in short.
All right. Let's hope for that, that we will see the results this time around. Mithali, why would we be able to see the results this time around? Donald Trump obviously looking for some distraction once again, considering the fact that, even after this deal with Iran, the MOU with Iran, his own party, the Republican Party, is not really happy with the way and the contents of the MOU that have been signed. Do you think that he's going to look for a distraction again?
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for bringing me into this conversation, Vidita. And I think, it's constant with Donald Trump, isn't it? First, he began his term by distracting the whole world from the Epstein files by talking about illegal tariffs. Then, when the illegal tariffs didn't work out the way he wanted, and he was, messing his relations with his own allies, he started this unasked for war, egged on by an ally who was just looking for the right opportunity to take the US into this endless loop. Now that the war and the end of the war has been signaled by most of the American public and a lot of political and economic commentators as a complete disaster, and the fact that the agreements that the US might be ending up signing with Iran actually give a lot more away than maybe Donald Trump intended. Now he must come back and say, oh, but I have secured a deal with the fastest growing economy on the planet, which is India. And in all of this, in this entire muck that we have been through of the last 1.5 years, I would like to say that the government of India and Prime Minister Modi have come out as extremely strong, astute decision makers, because they have never crossed the line in terms of how they have conducted themselves. They have never said anything publicly. They have always maintained, the perfect diplomacy which was required at that time in order to not mess up our relationship, and keeping in mind the fact that this is a long-term relationship between India and the US. If you remember on your show in February 2025, I think many of us were there. Sharanji and myself, we were definitely there. And we were speaking about the fact that Prime Minister Modi has flown down. He's one of the first leaders to meet President Trump. He has said, both have said, that the trade between India and US should reach $500 billion. That's the golden, goose. That's the target. That's the North Star, between the two countries. And that makes sense for both the countries even today. Even today, for India and US to work together, there are so many areas, whether it's technology, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's renewable energy, whether it's defense, whether it's semiconductors, electronics, the list goes on, pharmaceuticals. But at the end of the day, for any country in the global south to trust a country like the US today, a lot more trust building needs to be done. And why should India accept any lesser position? Because now there are no tariffs. The tariffs are illegal. In fact, India should be asking for reparations. India should be asking for refunds. What happened to all of the tariffs that our exporters paid in this entire period of 2025? We need to be getting refunds for that. It's only the US importers who have been able to go to a court in the US and get refunds, but Indians have not. And I think this is really where a lot of demands on the Indian side. And also, let me remind you and our viewers and everybody that India is the second largest buyer of oil in the global market. What does the US really want to sell today? It wants to sell the oil that American companies are going to be drilling out of Venezuela. So why should we give up any of our strong positions? Why should India give up a strong position? We should drive a hard bargain and get the best possible deal, whether it gets done by 24th or not. It is very important for India to fight tooth and nail in this situation.
Okay, that's well articulated, Mithali. Let me in fact get a reaction from Mr. Peter Cardillo on this as well. Mr. Cardillo, do you think that Donald Trump, in his very usual style, will say one thing and do another, and that's exactly what he's done with India as well? He's ridiculed India. He's also called India as a failing economy, but yet, says the opposite to the Prime Minister's face. And, this is something which is also going to pop up when the agreement is signed.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with that. That's the way President Trump is, and not only with trade deals, but with most things that he proposes. Some of them are really far-fetched and never come to fruition. For instance, when he first became president, he was talking about taking over Greenland. Well, whatever happened to that? We never heard about that anymore, didn't we? So, that's the way he's. That's the way he runs his ship. Is it good or bad? I don't know. Obviously, he's certainly not the best of diplomats, and so the bottom line is that India needs the United States, and the United States needs India. And so eventually there will be a deal. And I think it'll be a deal that will be positive for both countries. Let's not forget that we're looking at trade deals now that have to stay within the scope of the law. He was defeated with the reciprocal tax. And so even if he continues to threaten, I think that the nations that are being threatened, and I'm not only referring to India, but to other nations as well, realize that. And so they now have somewhat more of a bargain, they have more bargaining power. And I think that at the very end, the trade deals are not going to be what Donald Trump wanted. They'd be closer to what his administration probably wants. And they should be favorable for India or any other nation that finds itself in the same status as India is facing now.
You're quite spot on, sir. You're quite spot on. I appreciate you joining us, and I also appreciate all the other guests